In this tutorial, we'll analyze data from UNData on CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion. Our goal is to see how emissions have changed globally between 2010 and 2020. We'll use two CSV files available for download on the Tabulate website. These files originate from the UNData website and have been slightly modified for the purposes of this exercise. Once we have our files uploaded on Tabulate, you'll see two tables. Let's open the table with emissions data. You can explore the table. Notice that the data is tabular. We have columns like region, country, year, series, and emissions. Each row represents CO2 emissions for a specific country, year, and series. To change our data, we first create a prep, short for preparation. A prep is a way to modify the data without changing the original table. No data is lost. Let's clean up the data. We'll remove unnecessary columns and rename others to make the data more readable. Let's click on the Add a Step button and select Remove Columns. Then we choose the columns you want to remove. We click on Add a Step again and select Rename Columns. We rename the value column as Emissions. Here we go. Notice that the result on the right is updated in real time. On the left, we can see our transformations that are chained. We can click on the viewfinder icon to see the data at any step. For example, in the original table, or just after renaming the column, or after our last transformation. Next transformation. To ensure accurate analysis, we need to convert the emissions column to a numeric format to allow calculations. Click in the column header and select Convert to Numeric. Choose the appropriate options for the conversion, dot as decimal separator and comma as thousand separator. Now let's filter the data to keep only the total emissions. We click on the series column header and choose Filter, then Keep Rows Equal to Emissions. Let's compare the number of rows before and after the filter, clicking the viewfinder icon of the previous step. It has decreased from 2,264 to 1,132. To compare emissions between 2010 and 2020, we pivot the data so that each country has emissions values for both years in separate columns. We click on Add a Step and select Pivot Long to Wide. We fill in the fields, row identifier, country, pivoted column, year, value column, emissions, and pivot values, 2010 and 2020. See that the data is now pivoted. Each country has emissions values for both years in separate columns. Next, we calculate the difference in emissions between 2010 and 2020. We click on Add a Step and select Formula. We enter a name for the new column, such as Difference, and input the formula to calculate the difference between 2020 and 2010 emissions. The formula is 2020 minus 2010. We use backticks around the column names to reference them in the formula. We could use the function column with parentheses as well. Now we'll visualize the emission differences on a world map. Click on Create a Chart. The data visualization opens. Select Map of World Countries as the chart type. Drag and drop the country column to the countries field and the difference column to the color field. We need to aggregate the data to show only one value per country. We click on the aggregation button and choose Sum. Here we go. The world map shows the emission differences between 2010 and 2020 for each country. The color scale represents the changes in emissions over the decade. Hover over a country to see the exact value. Let's go back to the prep by clicking on the link in the left panel. To refine our analysis, we'll add population data for each country. Click on Add a Step and select Add Columns from another table. We fill in the fields, Table, Population 2010, Relation Type, keep rows that have matching values in both tables, Condition, Country in the original table is equal to region/country/area in the population table, and columns to add population, millions. We can see the new column with the population. Next, we calculate per capita emission differences. We click on Add a Step and select Formula. We enter a name for the new column, such as per capita difference, and input the formula to calculate the per capita difference. The formula is the difference between 2020 and 2010 emissions divided by the population in millions. Finally, we create a new world map to visualize per capita emission differences. We drag and drop the country column to the countries field and the per capita difference column to the color field. That's it. We've analyzed and visualized CO2 emissions data from yen data using Tabulate. Stay tuned for more tutorials and happy analyzing with Tabulate.